Well, good day and good morning. My name is Ren. I am the co-director of How Kids Learn and Temescal Associates. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague and co-director, Sam Piha. And today we're excited to share with you a little bit about creating a staff development plan. So we know it is the end of the year. Perhaps camp is still going on, and we are getting ready for a new year. And what is it that we're doing to look ahead and see how we need to prepare our staff for working with young people in the coming year? There's lots going on. Oh my goodness, I realized my video was off. I'm so sorry. We know that there's a lot going on in the world. And how is it that we are thinking about supporting our staff in working with our young people this year? There's lots of different elements to it. And today we are lucky to be joined by Paul Munier, the Executive Director of Youth Interventions Program Association. Say hi, Paul.
Hello.
And Jocelyn Weedo, the Network and Quality Coordinator from Sprockets, St. Paul, Minnesota Out of School Time Network. Say hi, Jocelyn.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here.
So the way this will work is we're going to hear from Paul and Jocelyn about their experiences with staff development, and we'll have an opportunity for a conversation. So you are welcome to put your comments into chat, and when the presentations are over, we'll bring you online and you can join the conversation and ask your question. These presentations will be available to you after our meeting today. We'll send out copies of what Jocelyn and Paul have shared with us. And I think that's about what I'm going to say. I will turn it over to Jocelyn.
Great. Thank you. All right. And let me know if you cannot see my screen. As Ren mentioned, my name is Jocelyn Weedo, she, her pronouns, and I've come to you today from the ancestral lands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. Dakota call it Minnesota Makoche. It's land where the land reflects the sky and the water reflects the sky. And as if you've ever been to Minnesota, we are the land of 10,000 lakes. And so we do have a lot of that. It is really beautiful. I encourage you to come and visit sometime, preferably during the summer, especially with those California folks. I don't know how you would want our winters, but I'm specifically from St. Paul, Minnesota. Sprockets is St. Paul's Out of School Time Network. And we work to increase the access to and improve the quality of after-school programs across St. Paul. We launched in about 2011. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of the work since then. And prior to that, I've worked in a lot of different contexts. So I have worked with summer camps, leadership programs, youth and government, enrichment programs, programming in school, out of school, as well as community-based diversion and probation programs, and offering wraparound coordination and case management. And so a lot of different contexts where youth work is happening, and that's really been beneficial for me as I work with Sprockets, because our network actually also is a variety of organizations and programs. So it's an open network that anyone who works with young people can be a part of, with a variety of contexts and settings. So anywhere from kindergarten through 12th grade participants, youth employment programs, gardening programs, leadership programs, culturally specific programs. So there really is a wide variety of work that is happening in St. Paul that I'm really excited to be a part of. So my goal today in this time that I have to present is to share a little bit about our Sprockets network and how we do the work. Not everyone obviously has access to a network or an intermediary. And so I'll share what we're doing, but hope that you'll be able to identify maybe what this might look like for you in within your organization or in your community, and just helpful in your context in general. So some of the things I'm going to touch on is thinking about continuous program improvement. And so when we think about professional development, we often think about how are we using program data to help inform and make decisions on where we need to improve and how we can support staff in that work. I'm going to also talk a little bit about the social emotional learning program quality assessment, and that's what we use for shared language and thinking about staff development. And wrapping up and talking a little bit about job embedded supports and how supervisors and coordinators can support that learning at their site. So a little bit about Sprockets. You know, we intentionally cultivate all of the spaces that we create to foster a culture of learning. Um, every time we bring people together, we're thinking about what's the content, like what is the theme that we're talking about. But the other piece that I think is really valuable is how are we making sure multiple voices and perspectives are a part of that conversation, because we really are always learning from each other. We have a very diverse community in St. Paul, and you know, we like to create spaces where people can think about like, how does this apply to me personally? How does it apply to my larger community? And what voices aren't there? And so part of that learning is about that conversation. And so we do our work through kind of these three lanes. We think about professional development, so the actual training that happens. We also think about our network gatherings. How do we learn from each other? And continuous program improvement. And again, I'll touch on those all briefly. Our network gatherings really is about building community and that learning from each other. Some of the themes, you know, I mentioned, we talk about a lot about self-care, youth leadership, summer tips, tricks, identity. It really does change. And we do that in response to what we're hearing from our partners. And as a network, we have the ability to host these quarterly. And then we do trainings again, at least monthly, often more than that. But what I would say is that, you know, within an organization, we sometimes end up in an echo chamber and hearing and doing things the same way. And I think that there really is this value in finding ways to connect with others, to find out what other people are doing, how they think about the work, and really be inspired of that. Again, even if it's outside of the context of the work that you do specifically. And so wanted to mention that that's a value that we hold in our network as well. We also know that because learning in community is so beneficial, I mentioned we do a lot of one-off trainings, but we also know that really deep learning happens in relationship over time. And because we are a network, we have the ability to bring people from different organizations to learn together. But I do think that learning community can also happen within an organization. Over the years, especially in relation to social and emotional work, we know that it starts with the adults and understanding what these pieces mean to us. And once we learn that and be able to share and connect with each other, we can really build those spaces for for the young people in our programs. So here's an example of one we just wrapped up. It was an 18-month community of practice where we had 22 youth workers from, I think, about 13 different organizations that learned and grow together. So I wanted to point that out. We've done other ones in the past as well, and they are intensive in terms of resources, but the learning is really deep, and the building connections across the teams are really important as well. So again, when we think about what we want for those spaces for young people and what it looks like and what it feels like, we think it's really important that we're modeling that to create those spaces for adults as well, so that they can see what it feels like and what it looks like as well. I talked about the continuous program improvement. So on top of the professional development pieces, we think a lot about continuous program improvement and how do we use data to help inform our decision making. And again, sometimes that is the program changes that we want to see, but we also know that what staff do within the program impacts that. So that does kind of connect with that professional development piece as well. So this is probably one of the largest pieces of how we support our network. And you'll note on the screen, it talks about Ignite After School. That is Minnesota's statewide out of school time network. And so we work really intentionally on lining our resources and the way that we talk about the language that we use with Ignite, because while we're in St. Paul, we have our partners across the state that are doing very similar work. It is grounded in what we feel like is this formula. When we think about data, we know that when young people consistently attend a quality program where they have positive experiences, there will be positive outcomes. And so we use those 4 areas of data. But we know not everybody has all 4 of those, or they're building up that capacity. So I just want to point out on the right side of the screen that Ignite also has a single data set reflection guide that is really a what, so what now process, but it really helps for teams to kind of walk through um, thinking about data and what it means to them as they're making those decisions. What I will say that's the most important part of this process is that data is only part of that conversation. That staff perspective in the program really is what makes that data come alive. And so part of that then is this huddle. That's where we bring youth workers together to talk about data. Now, full disclosure, I did not become a youth worker because I love data. What I do love is that conversation. And so when we're talking about, when you have a team of people that really care deeply about their work and they're talking about this data and what does it mean to them, they're able to kind of filter through it and identify what do we want to celebrate, what good work is happening in our program now, but also identify what are some areas that they want to explore further, that maybe they want to see what they could be doing and to adapt their program to be responsive to what they're hearing from young people, or to go a little bit deeper in those areas. And then also prioritizing. There's a lot of things we want to do, but what do we have resources for? What do we have some energy around for that next year, whether it's a couple months or longer term goals? And that's where I think having youth workers a part of that conversation on where the growth happens and what needs to be done is really important in building an investment in those plans, in participation, and in the energy and eagerness to go into continuing with that work, that they're a part of those conversations, identifying the needs and also identifying the steps that go towards meeting that need. So this is a process that we do facilitate. We host probably 6 of these a year, so programs could find the time that works for them and their staff. And yeah, it's a really great energy. And again, I'm not the only one who's a youth worker who doesn't like data, but it's so amazing to see how engaging folks are when they are a part of that conversation. Also, I remember from my youth work days, I did a lot of collecting surveys, but never really saw the results of those surveys. And so being able to make sure that data is accessible to youth workers is really important as well. At the end of that, you know, we have folks write things down. And so you'll notice here we talk about it as a commitment to action. We used to call them improvement plans, but I think that's really a weighted term, because a lot of times improvement plans, there's this kind of connection with here's where you're failing, so here's what you need to do to improve in terms of job performance. And so for us, it is about, like, as a team, they've decided to take action, and what are those things that they're going to do. The other thing we know about when we think about SMART goals is that, you know, even just the goal itself is supposed to be considered SMART. And just like I didn't become a youth worker because of data, I am not a fan of wordsmithing. So, you know, some people can get derailed trying to come up with what is the perfect way to phrase this goal. And so we've kind of broken it into a way that's a little bit more manageable for folks, in that the SMART is within the conversation and the details. So how are they really identifying the action items, when those things are going to be done by, who's going to be responsible for taking the leads of those components, and then how are they going to check in on their progress. That has been the biggest challenge, I think, for our programs in this process, is how do you keep that movement happening once you've had this really exciting day and you've really come together to keep those things alive. So this is just a brief overview of how we support continuous program improvement and connecting to professional development as they're thinking about those action items. Often some of it is like, what do staff need in terms of knowledge or practice that they can continue to work on to improve their work. So we talked about the 4 areas. I mentioned those 4 areas of data, But the one that is most relevant to youth practice is that quality. And so we define quality as the point of service, like what are staff doing intentionally to create that space um, for young people to have a quality experience. And so we have adopted early on, probably about 2012, using the Weichert Center for Youth Program Quality. Their SEL, their YPQA, and then now the SELPQA is our framework for both planning and for observation. And it's really provided us a shared language on what our quality practices. Now, we know that Weichert Center didn't involve quality or didn't invent quality youth work. But the way that they have framed it and put it together has been helpful for us to say what do we need to be working on as a city or as a program. We also have been able to do a lot of our trainings connected to those aspects that they would be planning and measuring around. So there's that consistency. Um, Years ago, I was trained, so we have the capacity within our network to provide these trainings both for the original YPQA elements as well as the SEL ones. And so that's been really great. We think the tool also, though, is really helpful for planning. So looking at aspects of it, and if you're saying, we really want to talk about safe space, what does that look like in our program? What do we do intentionally to make it a safe space? How do we know it's safe for young people? And that's where that other piece of data, right? Getting that youth experience data in there kind of helps to affirm, if what you're doing is really meeting the goals. So we think for planning purposes and conversation, it's really important to help build the skills of youth workers to recognize what they do does matter. But we also think and provide training around doing internal observation. So how could they observe each other to see what that looks like? And professional development wise, you learn a lot when you watch other people do their work. What are some practices maybe you want to mimic from them or, resource or put your own spin to? Has been really helpful. And then the reflection that comes about like, why, I saw you do this. How did that work for you? Or, what might it look like for me in my practice as well? We also provide external observations. And so from that, they can use those reports to identify where their practice is showing up and where some areas maybe they want to prioritize thinking forward. So again, we provide a lot of trainings grounded in this work. And we offer them at no cost. They're accessible. But I still had noticed that it's really hard to see that quality improvement, especially as a network, right? We're not right connected with staff, but I would see some of the same people come to multiple trainings and still hear from them some concerns and being discouraged, or for their supervisors, not certain that all of that is getting applied. And so I think it was about 2017, I participated in two different fellowships between, 2017, 2019, that really meant to study what is that? What is this? But what can supervisors do to support youth workers in their staff development? And through that first paper, I did a lot of interviews. And what we heard from a direct youth worker, which actually I had already kind of felt, so it was affirming to me. But people can come to trainings, they can get the content, but if they don't have someone back at their site to talk about it with, to reflect with, to help to put some of those practices into play, it really is difficult for staff. And so I wanted to explore that more and think, what can staff do? And from that first study, really focusing in on creating that culture of learning. And how do we take what we know works in OST? So like, how do we supervise in our OST style, embedding some of those things that we know are really good for young people are actually helpful for adults, and it allows them a place to see it modeled by their supervisor. So I don't know, for me, I've been in youth work for a long time, and often, I started as frontline youth worker and you get promoted. There's a lot of promotion that happens internally. And so really great youth workers become supervisors, but they don't always have the supervisor skills, or they model what they've seen, which is the time cards, which is scheduling, which is putting out fires. And so really trying to help supervisors see, like, if you put on your youth worker hat as a supervisor, you are supporting and mentoring your staff in a way that's really supportive for their learning as well. And just like I didn't become a youth worker because I like to wordsmith or to look at data, I also was not a huge fan of reading journal articles, which was part of both of these fellowships was to write journal articles. And so to make it more accessible, I did write those papers, which there's links available for those for people who are interested in that. But I created some workshops that we did both locally and nationally that brought this, question kind of interactively to staff. And so the image on the screen shows a rubric that was created or a matrix created by folks at these different workshops where we said if you were to think about quality youth work practices and community building, and the reality of your program is you don't have much time. If you had 10 minutes, how would you build community? If you had 30 minutes at your staff meeting, how could you do that? If you had 2 hours to go deeper, how would that look? And we did that same process along with planning and choice. So how are your staff having some autonomy and some time to plan to put in those intentional practices that they're learning? And for some organizations, and yours, you might be like, oh yeah, they have a lot of autonomy. Some organizations, they go by their curriculum or their set pieces that staff are just handed when they walk in the door. And so being able to be invested in creating and put their personality into things is really helpful as well. So that choice planning, I'm thinking about reflection and having time to reflect as a team and leading and mentoring. And again, all of the things in that pyramid I think are helpful and we know that they build upon each other. But those were ones that in that research, we found that were really pivotal to staff in thinking about that adult learning and making it applicable for them. The other thing that we've done in terms of like the leadership as a network, when we do those trainings, I try to leave at the end some kind of a teach back or take it back agenda so that staff that attend can then go back to their site and share that with others. So if that's at a staff meeting, here's my key takeaways, and they could have a conversation of it, but being able to build in some of those resources to help them think about how they bring it back to their team. And again, one of the things that we hear a lot from our partners, and this may apply to you all in your context, is that there are volunteers, part-time staff, and full-time staff, but some folks have multiple things that they're juggling. So having time to even attend, so one, maybe they are attending our workshop and they're getting this valuable information, and maybe they have an opportunity to bring this back and talk with their staff about it or their colleagues or to model it. But there still are some folks who just can't get to trainings. Our trainings are typically offered during the day. And if there's part-time staff that work program hours, that's not always accessible. So a couple of years ago, we started creating what we call our quick guide videos. So we take some of the content that might be in some of our trainings, and instead of making them engaging, like all of our in-person trainings are very engaging. Again, there's that listening, that perspectives that we think is so important that are in that in-person. I mean, I think they're very, very valuable. But we do these shorter versions, like here's the content, and then created some reflection guides that folks could watch. I say quick guides, some are 10 minutes. There's some that are as long as 30 minutes, but they can watch it, the content, and then the reflection, thinking about what does that mean to them, thinking about their program. And so we encourage supervisors to think about how they might utilize this as like small catalog of resources for content that they can have. Maybe if they have new staff coming on that have missed the training, or if they have part-time staff that can't attend a training, that they could watch these videos, do the reflection sheet, and then talk about it at their next staff meeting or have some questions or opportunities. So this has been a strategy that we have used. We are a very small staff team, and so our goal is to make things accessible to our partners. It's like YouTube videos and downloadable documents. It's pretty straightforward. The videos, we talk about progress, not perfection. So they are like not highly produced. They're really just videos with me talking over the content. But it's continuing to evolve. And we've had some of our partners also create quick guide videos so that they can share their expertise. But yeah, so this has been a strategy as we're trying to think of having multiple ways to support organizations. Just, I think to wrap up my portion before we hear about Paul and some more specific things around professional development plans, my key takeaways, because I know I covered a lot, but my key takeaways is thinking about really how do you intentionally foster a culture of learning within your organization. And it can't just be a checklist plan of here's what you need to do, but how are we building community so that folks do feel comfortable being vulnerable, talking about where they need supports, engaging staff in that conversation so they're a part of the decision making that goes into what are the trainings or the professional development that we need, to be reflective about the content and find ways to recognize that there are multiple perspectives and it's hard work. And so when you're trying these great practices in real time, what works, what is challenging, and what supports do you need to move things forward, I think is really important. And again, there's that continuous program improvement and how are we really maintaining that value that we are always reflecting and adapting, which is also important just to meet the changing times and the young people in our program as things continue to change. And then making sure that it's embedded. You'd be surprised or maybe not, but making sure that people are scheduling time that staff get paid for to either attend trainings or to be in their space planning or connecting with each other or having that reflection time, connecting what they're doing to the work and having it be meaningful and supportive to them as well. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm excited for questions and also to hear from Paul.
Jocelyn, thank you so much. What fantastic information and wealth of knowledge that you bring. Really appreciate it. I was able to put in some of the links that you were talking about as you were talking.
They're also on the slide. So when they follow up with the slide deck, if you wanted to look further into those, you can.
Fantastic. And so, Paul, I'll give you an opportunity now to either do some reflection on what Jocelyn said or to do your presentation. We'll do the reflection afterwards.
Yeah, I think if it's okay, I'll just dive right in. But before I do that, I'm hoping the people who are on the call today can help me out just a little bit. We're talking today about building professional training plans. And in the chat box, would you mind and put in there, do you have a written training plan right now, either for your organization or for the individuals that you work with? And I'd like to see where our participants are at. So I'll open up my chat box and please go ahead and write in there. Just, do you have a professional development plan now? Mary, thank you. Ron? That's it. So I'll be patient. I've learned to live in silence, so that's okay. I'll wait. Kimberly, great. Way to go. Awesome. It looks like some people do. Very minimal. Great. Thank you for answering that question. That helps me understand where everybody's at and gives me a little insight into maybe how I can frame what I hope to share with you today. I will start just by introducing myself so you know who I am. As Ren said, I'm Paul Munier, and I am the Executive Director of the Youth Intervention Programs Association. I am a trained psychologist. That's how I began working with young people. I did individual therapy and ran a day treatment program for, about 17 years. And I was the lead of a therapeutic team in a setting for EBD program for a number of those years as well, and helped coordinate the care and the professional development of the team, and also the well-being of all the young people in the program. And I've been the executive director of the Youth Intervention Programs Association for a long time now. I 10 plus years, something like that. So I've held leadership roles most of my life, and I've really come to understand the importance of helping people grow, and and setting a culture in which people feel a strong sense of belonging, and a desire to drive a mission forward within the youth serving agency that they're in. So that's what I focus on, and that's what I'm really intentional about. I also, it was funny that I got asked to do this particular training, because in my undergraduate studies, I was part of the organizational psychology program at the University of Minnesota before it became a major. That's how old I am. At one point, it was just a track. And I took all the organizational and professional development programs that they had to offer at the time. It wasn't necessarily a minor, but it's near and dear to me. I've been training people and involved in the professional development of people who support young people a good chunk of my life. And I'm also a former elected person. So with that, I'll just dive in and explain a little bit about what I think is important for creating a professional development plan. And I'd encourage you to ask any questions that you have. I'm not very good at multitasking, so I don't even have the chat box open because I find it very distracting to me. But if you do have questions, I would be happy to entertain them at the end. Or if you just want to interrupt me, Ren, feel free at any time. I've designed my slides to be more of a handout. So I am not going to talk about everything on the slides. I'm going to talk about them in generalities to give you the biggest picture possible. And if you want to do a deeper dive, they would be available in the handouts. So I want to start by saying youth workers are youth work. It's a simple statement, but hard to wrap your head around. I think regardless of the quality of the building, the sports equipment, the funding that you get, what's really the most essential part of youth work is having the people who are interacting with young people with the knowledge, skills, and confidence to establish those trusting relationships. So one of the reasons you would want to have a professional development plan for your organization or for your individual people is because, let's face it, you take the youth worker out of the equation, there's no such thing as youth work. It's all about building relationships and developing that trust. And if youth workers don't have the innate abilities, or they don't do the work themselves to establish those relationships, then it doesn't really matter how good your program is. It's all about the ability of the people doing the work to establish those connections. So one reason to do that is because you can't escape the fact that the quality of your program is going to be related to the quality of the training of the people that are doing the work there. Another strong reason to have a professional development plan is to make sure you get the best people into your program. It's hard sometimes to recruit people into youth serving programs, especially today. We live in a tough, toxic environment, and the pay isn't great, as we all know. And if all things are equal, if you have an organization that's committed to the well-being and the growth of the people that work in your organization, you're going to be able to recruit more people than the organizations that don't. So if you're out recruiting people, I strongly encourage you to talk about the professional development that you offer to people, because the data is really clear across industries. People ultimately choose a place to work based on their belief system that they can grow and they can have some sort of meaningful impact to something that's bigger than themselves. So your ability to recruit people is dependent on how good your training is. So another reason to have a strong training plan is it will help you recruit. But once you get people, we all know that retention is difficult too. The data is also very clear on this. In the field of youth work, across all the different youth disciplines, from education to mentoring to out of school time to restorative justice to you name it. It's about a third of the people turn over every year. There's millions of youth workers in the United States alone. And if you think about the turnover rate, what that has, the impact on the cost to your program, the institutional knowledge that walks out the door, the time spent in training and development, and also the cost of retraining people and starting all over is super expensive. So again, the data is clear. If you can get people to feel like they're growing into their field and they have a strong sense of knowledge, skills, and confidence, which equals competency, and if they feel competent in the work that they're doing, they're likely to stay. So these are all just big macro ideas about why you would want to have a training plan as you frame it in your mind, and you maybe talk to people in your programs about why we need to do that. I just gave you 3 reasons why you might want to consider having a professional development plan. So getting into the plan, I think it's really critical that you have it in writing. And I know Jocelyn laid that out very clearly. A lot of organizations that we work with, and we have organizations around the world that are part of our association. And I am fortunate enough to talk to a lot of these people. Everybody's got good intentions about training, and everybody has good intentions about training plans. But we know what it's like to run a youth serving program. We know what it's like day to day in a youth serving program. And training is one of the things that falls by the wayside when there's a crisis, when you need to meet the needs of a young person or a particular staff person didn't show up for a shift, that if you don't have it in writing, it goes by the wayside, plain and simple. So you have to have a plan that's written. It has to be accountable to somebody on your team who's responsible for it and holds that accountability to make sure that's carried through. And it has to be reviewed on a regular basis. It just can't be a document that you write once and you put it on a shelf. It has to be reviewed on a regular basis in order to make sure you're meeting the objectives of that particular training plan. The other things that need to be included in your training plan and considered is your onboarding training. So we talked about the idea of retention and recruitment, and you have your first time to work with the person that joins your team. And if you don't have a really solid onboarding training plan that sets the stage that we're committed to your growth, we're committed to your well-being, you're going to lose them right away. And all your desires about professional development are going to fall by the wayside pretty quickly if you don't role model exactly what it is you want your organization and the people in that to do. So in your written plan, make sure you have a really strong framework about onboarding, because that's going to set the stage for everything down the road. So you got to start off strong, and you have to have clear things that people need to know with that are particular to your organization, but also maybe some basics that are fundamental to the well-being of young people. Suicide prevention, suicide awareness, ethics trainings about doing the right thing. All those kinds of things might be just part of something that you want to set the stage with people from the get-go. And then the other thing that you should have is part of your plan is, how are we going to communicate about training? So I've seen a lot of programs say they're committed to it, but yet they never talk about it. Do you have regular communications with your team about what training opportunities are available to them? And also what your expectations are of training for them? Do they know exactly what's going on? And so it's really important that you, as leaders, and I'm assuming most of you are leaders based on the titles and the things that you put in there, are communicating clearly what is expected and keeping that alive about the importance of them being skillful in working with young people. Another important thing in your training plan is goals. What do you hope to accomplish? Is it improving the knowledge in one of the skill areas involved in youth work? Is it an overall just growth in general? You have to be super clear about what it is you're trying to do. As I've been in this field for a long time, and I think the prevailing thought is that we just want everybody to be good and we're going to just offer these random trainings. I think it needs to be more detailed than that and a little bit more focused on about what is it that's important to your program? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your program? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your individuals? So you have to have measurable goals. And again, if you have a written plan, then you have somebody accountable to it. And who's checking to make sure that those plans and those objectives were met? So having clearly identifiable and measurable goals is really important. Another thing that I think gets overlooked so much is the culture in your organization. What kind of I don't know, environment do you have around growth mindset? The continuous learning culture that says we're never really done getting good at this. It's a continuous involvement. Does your team celebrate growth? Does your team share in the success of other people when they learn or they become much more proficient at handling a crisis per se? What is your culture like about growth and development? And those things have got to be laid out clearly in your plan. How do we create an environment that says we promote professional growth? And I think that's really critical to be involved in there. And again, I just want to remind everybody, I'm not addressing all the bullet points in here because that would take a real long time, but I did want to give you more specifics that you could dive into if you care to. One of the most overlooked things in the field of youth work is cross-training. All of us understand very clearly your team is only going to be as strong as your least trained staff. And just about every team has some people that are superstars, and just about every team has some people that can kind of cause havoc in your program. A wonderful growth opportunity for both of those groups of people are cross-training and mentorship. So pair up the people that are really skilled and give them the leadership ability to nurture and grow, and ask them to do trainings for your organization. Empower them to be the experts. If you ever want to get good at something, train somebody on it. That's how you really develop your skill. And allow your team to do that. Build it right into your training plan that you're going to mentor those people. We talked about recruitment and retention, which is so critical in our field. What if you take new people in that are relatively green, and that happens a lot, and match them up with somebody who's really skillful? And you encourage both of them to grow together. Wonderful things will happen. Both of them will appreciate that opportunity. So think about cross-training within your program. And then finally, I think you have to have some sort of assessment tool, some sort of measurement that says, what are the needs of our program? What kind of skill sets are we looking for? What kind of competencies are we good at? What kind of competencies do we need to improve on? And whatever your model is, I think you need to adhere to that. And if you don't have a model, I encourage you to think of it or connect with some organization that does have a model. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but what does it take to be competent in youth work? You can't just say, I want people to be good. You have to say, what is it specifically you want them to be good at? And so I'm the executive director of the Youth Intervention Programs Association. We developed a model, and we took members from a wide range of programs, and we asked people years ago, tell us what it takes to be good at building these connections and to being helpful in supporting young people. And we got this long laundry list, and we put it into 8 competencies areas. And we believe these are the 8 competencies areas that comprise excellence in youth work. And I think it's so critical if you don't have some way of knowing what it is you want to do. You're just kind of spinning your wheels. So you could use our competency level, the things that Jocelyn laid out, whatever it is you want to do, you may already have them. But if you don't, make sure you do, because it's all got to be established on something you can measure and focus on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these particular competency areas. But again, like I did with my slides about the culture and the environment of a written training plan, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm not going to address everything on all the slides. The first competency we have is the field of youth work. And I think it's important that people have a grounding in how they fit into this large industry. I did some research not too long ago about the size of the youth development industry in the United States alone, and it's $1.2 trillion. The United States spends that much money in youth development. When you consider all the different disciplines together, it's about 4.3% of our GDP in the United States. This is no small thing. This is so much bigger than our individual programs. And it's important that the people doing this work have some sort of context about how they fit into the system and what that means and what their roles are and where their competencies start and stop. And it's also important people understand self-care. And in the field of youth work, self-care is so critical because if you can't meet the needs of young people because you're not in a place to do it yourself, again, you're really going to have problems in your program. So the idea of understanding what youth work is and your role in that is really critical. The other thing that our members told us is youth development. It seems pretty self-explanatory, but it's really complicated to think about meeting young people where they're at based on their developmental stages. Sometimes people could be biologically one age, but developmentally at a very different age. And if you don't have that basic understanding about development in terms of social, emotional, psychological, physical development, you're really going to be missing opportunities, and you're going to be having expectations of young people that they're unable to fulfill. Therefore, it's going to create frustrations in them and frustrations in you. The other thing that I think is really important is communications. I talked at the very beginning about you are youth work. You can't separate the two. It's people that is youth work. And your ability to communicate on a very effective level is so much more than being able to hold a conversation with a young person. I think so often in our industry, we confuse an ability to converse with being good at communications. I don't think they're the same thing. And so we understand nonverbal communication is really important, and just so much about the dynamics of individual conversation, group dynamics, all those kinds of things, listening skills. Oh my goodness. So think about communications as being one of the things that your team has to be good at. One of the most critical things that I think is so under talked about is the ethics in youth work. And I don't mean the ethics about don't have a romantic relationship with a young person in your program. That's a given. Just about everybody knows that's wrong. Even the people who do it probably know it's wrong because they cover it up. So ethics means the decisions you make, the way you show up, the way you present yourself, the kinds of nonverbal cues you get, the way you dress, the way you respond to people, the way you don't respond to people. There's continuous ethical considerations about the work you do, and that's really important to understand. I think like I said before, it's one of the most undervalued, important things about the field of youth work. And again, we talk about ethics, about these big things like, yeah, there's rules, don't get drunk with the, we all know that, right? I mean, come on. It's such a deeper level than that. And I think that's really got to be explored. And if you've been in this field a long time, you've seen people with bad ethical practices around young people. I promise you have. It makes you cringe when they're dealing with their own power issues, things like that. Another thing is to make sure that you have people who are skilled at understanding the goal of youth work is equitable opportunities for each and every young person, regardless of anything else. That's the most important thing. And to have the skills and the awareness and the own comfort level to carry that out is something that needs a lot of discussion, a lot of work. And quite honestly, I believe as a white male, the freedom to make a lot of mistakes, because if you just are sitting in your comfort zone, that means you're not trying to understand. We have to have a culture where we said we're willing to learn and grow together, and I think that's really important. Another thing is behavioral intervention. Gosh, I've seen so many people handle this the wrong way. And when a young person's dysregulated, how do you get them back into regulation? So having those skills and dealing with that is really important. And knowing how to have a team structure set up about how you're going to deal with a de-escalated young person is really critical. And having the skills to de-escalate somebody is maybe the hardest part of being a youth worker. We all love to build relationships. Times are great when we're all having fun and the young people are connecting with us and they're making good progress and we're feeling proud about the work that we're doing and the connections we had. But it's really, really difficult to deal with a dysregulated young person. And that's what I think one of the big reasons that causes a lot of burnout in our field. 2 competencies left. The second to last one is at-risk behaviors. Gosh, probably the biggest liability to your program that there is. And if you don't have competency and I think evidence that you're trying to teach people how to recognize and deal with that at-risk behaviors, you're kind of sitting there vulnerable. So take, for example, a young person who just casually mentions to one of your team members, I smoked crack last night. I'm just making something up. Say they said that. And that team member just said, oh, don't do that. And then something terrible happens, right? How do you prove or how do you articulate to an upset person or a community about how you handled that disclosure? So I think it's really important you focus on at-risk behaviors. And the final one is, we all know that mental health is a real issue. I saw somebody in the comment sections said they're really concerned about the mental health of and the mental well-being and the mental health wellness of young people. I share that concern, but I also want to point out something. This is a personal bias of mine. As somebody who's a psychologist and spent years diagnosing young people, I think we've too casually attribute so many of the behaviors of young people to mental health issues. There's a real difference between chronic and acute mental health issues. Some of our young people are living in chronic stress, racism, poverty, structural things, abuse, violence. Some of the behaviors they do are absolutely normal for survival mode. And we're so quick as a society to say there's something wrong with them. As a psychologist, it didn't take me long to figure out sometimes there's nothing wrong with these kids. There's a lot of things wrong with our systems, a lot of things wrong with the way we support them. So be careful, is my warning, is to not overanalyze and attribute everything to mental health. A lot of times it's normal survival things that are really good for young people who are living through some really bad stuff. The angst, the anxiety about environmental issues, about the political culture, are so real. It would be unusual for a lot of our young people to not have concerns and maybe not know how to deal with that. And it might look like mental illness, but really it's just survival strategies. So with that, I would like to just thank you on behalf of my entire team for your commitment to young people. We at YIPA are very committed to our just cause. And our just cause is that every young person has the love and the support they need to lead a meaningful and fulfilling life. And we've got a lot of work to do, but we are working very hard to do that. And we provide all kinds of trainings. We train people from all over the world. We have 130 some trainings that are all available online, including certificate courses for youth work and also youth work leadership. And I encourage you to take a look at them. My goal isn't here to sell memberships. We don't sell memberships. We invite people to come along and be part of the YIPA community if you want to. But we have a lot of good things that can help people. And we have 350 people who are part of the YIPA organization at the agency level. I mean, we have 350 agencies across the country in several different continents now. Also, we'll say one last thing. I just wrote a book and I'm working with the publisher now. It's called Relationships Are Everything and What Youth Workers Can Teach Us About Leadership. So if you're looking for a book on leadership in the field of youth work, it's not out there. But I wrote one and it's coming, and I'm eager to share it with the world. And if you ever would like to have trainers or anybody come in and talk about that, please know you can reach out to me. I'm happy to do that stuff. So I put our training website on this PowerPoint, but you can find it and just Google YIPA, and I promise you will pop up first. Thank you. That's it for me, Ren. I'll stop sharing.
Fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much. I am going to get you out of speaker spotlight so that everybody can see us. Something is funny with my camera. Not exactly. There we go. All right. Oh my goodness. So much to talk about. First, I would just ask Paul and Jocelyn, do you have something you would like to say about each other's presentations? It's okay if you don't.
Well, I'll start since the invitation was given. This is funny that Jocelyn and I are doing this presentation together because we know each other from days gone by through YIPA. And it's just a pleasure to work with her. I know Jocelyn is a leader in this field. I watch her work with great pride and envy, and I'm just grateful to be doing this with her. And I know Sprockets is doing great things here in Minnesota. I hear about it. So thank you for your leadership on that, Jocelyn.
Yeah, same. I will say, Sprockets is a program out of the city of St. Paul, which has a YIPA membership and access to a lot of those trainings and that we underutilize. And so I recently got my own, Paul, log on so I can be an admin to help connect folks with trainings that we don't offer, right? Like, so thinking about where do you have access to the content and the expertise is a really helpful thing. And as Paul was talking, I just want to keep going. Yes. Many of the things he was talking about so much more succinctly than I was were some of those youth work practices, right? Finding ways to pair up mentors, create leaders among your staff team. The thought about like the retention and job satisfaction and how in keeping staff. We had staff during that research that I did that even if they knew that youth work was not their last place, like they had other aspirations, they stayed much longer than they would have because they liked the culture, they liked the environment, that they knew they had folks that were invested in them. And so really paying attention to the culture that you create within your staff team makes a huge difference. And when they decide to leave, they're not like, peace, I'm out, right? Like there usually is a good notice and you're able to work through those transitions. The other thing that came to me as Paul was talking, one of the things that we've talked a lot about in our network, we have a community advisory council of youth work supervisors and things that help to inform our work. And we know that one of the staff said, or one of the youth workers said, passion doesn't pay the bills, right? Like youth work is not a really lucrative field. And so how do we think about how we're supporting youth workers in the profession to be able to take on different roles? And so last spring, we did a network gathering called From Passion to Profession, and we brought in executive directors, grant writers, people in their long-term now field career that started out as youth workers to talk about their story. And there is not one path. I mean, there's so many different paths that lead to. So how are we helping create some opportunities for growth in like folks who are interested in writing, that grant writing, to learn about the field in that way, to think about how they are building their coaching and mentoring skills and those supervisory practices, so they really are prepared for those next levels. And yeah, so I just, all those things were all going through my mind too, that there's so many things to think about when we're talking with staff, and where we see they maybe need to develop, and what are their goals and aspirations, and how do we support them in those goals, even if they aren't to continue frontline youth work forever. And we have folks that do that. They are in it for the work and for the young people, and they want to be frontline doing that. And I think that's great. And that's, again, creating the opportunities to leverage their brilliance along with the brilliance of the new folks coming in. I had a high school intern this summer that has taught me a lot about promoting programs and using Clipchamp and all the social media things, right? And so how do we also leverage our newer staff in helping us to learn as well? So I'll pause there. I would love to hear what kind of resonated with others as well, or questions people might have.
Hey, Ren, can
Yeah.
I ask a question?
Please.
I noticed a lot of people put yes, that they do have training plans in their program. I don't know, in your environment here, could we allow them to come on and tell us what's
Oh,
in their plan
abs-
and
abs-
what's going well for them and what's not? It would be really nice to hear. I'm really curious about what people put in their plans.
Absolutely. You may come on camera if you're comfortable and unmute yourself, and let us know what's going on with your training plans. Is there one amongst you who'd like to talk with us? Matt.
Whoa.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. I'm with the Boys and Girls Club of San Francisco, the Director of Staff Development and Program Quality. And we have for our professional development plans, I'm fairly new. I'm about 3 months into the job. And my colleague Danielle is also fairly new. She's a couple weeks into the job. So we're collaborating together to figure out how we can make our individual growth plans a little bit better. They're a little bit messy, kind of all over the place. And so um, it is a lot of we help staff and we work with them on like where they want to be within the organization or outside of the organization. And we create a coaching plan. The thing is, our individual growth plans don't really have a timeline and they're not really attached to a guarantee. So like it's not like if you complete this individual growth plan, like now you get to move to the next level. Now it's like, all right, you did it, right? So we're kind of stuck in like, how can we make this be more effective for our staff? And I like what both of you all said around, just like the a better understanding for our youth workers that are working with our kids every day, right? And so we're just like this presentation was like super helpful because I I'm trying to figure out how we can better our individual growth plan and like what we can do to like also retain our staff. But sometimes like the feedback that I've been hearing over the last 3 months is like, we've been on this individual growth plan for 3 years and I still haven't moved out of my role or I haven't grown the way I want to. And so when we think about like trainings and things like that, I'm very big on, I come from a training background. So what I initially wanted was like, okay, all these people that are asking for these trainings and things like that, it's not necessarily mandatory, it's optional. And when we make them optional, they don't kind of show up for those trainings. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to work with my org to make these trainings more mandatory. So that way they show up and they're getting and the big thing is time, right? Like we don't have the time. Some of our youth workers work part-time and things like that. But I've been willing to like sit down and like calendar out some time because that's my whole role is like just the professional development, right? So wanting to, I've learned a lot from you all and some tools that I'm going to take back and tough conversations I have to have, right, around our individual growth plans. But to answer your question, we do, but it's still we're learning the nuances of what we can and can't kind of grab.
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. And I don't think you're alone. I think that there's a lot of people in youth serving agencies just like you that have great intentions, but it's hard to figure out how to get it going, and it's hard to find the time and to keep the discipline to keep it alive. Did you say you're coaching, working individually with some of your team?
Yeah, so I'm trying a new approach as I come into my role of like before there was a lot of like training and not a lot of follow-up. And my big thing is coming in and after training, coaching them through the things that we learned, following up not just in an email, but like personally of like showing up to each individual club and being like, hey, we talked about this in the training because like they go to trainings and they forget what they learned sometimes, you know? So how can I be more effective in their growth and also letting them know that I'm paying close attention to each staff member that we have at each clubhouse to be effective.
Wow, I think that is so cool. You think about, think in the business community, the executive directors and the top leadership and the C suites of these corporations, they all have personal coaches and they pay tons of money for these personal coaches. And why do they do that? Because there's so much value to it. Because people need that kind of connection, that kind of relationship with somebody to keep them grounded and keep them focused. And I think one of the things we miss a lot in the field of youth work is understanding that core basic principle about just connecting with people. You know, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that we work so hard to build relationships with young people, but I want to be careful how I say it. Leaders often don't put enough of that same energy into the people that they lead or the people who choose to follow them. So in our industry, most people are good at youth work, then they get promoted into a leadership role because they're good at youth work. And then they don't have the leadership skills to then know what their new role means. And yet it isn't that different. You have to have that kind of relationship with the people who are choosing to follow you. So that means connecting with them, building that relationship, building that connection. So Matt, I think it's absolutely great news to hear you say that, because I think that's how you're going to really help those people grow. Sometimes the growth isn't about taking a course. Sometimes the growth is talking out a difficult scenario that you're facing in your program about a particular young person with somebody that's got the skill and the knowledge to help them. And that will give them the confidence and the awareness that you deeply care. And that will carry them so far with the outcomes of the young people and with their longevity with your program, because they'll feel like you really care about them. So kudos for you, Matt. And I'll say, I like your hat, and I'm sorry about your Oakland A's, man.
I actually, Matt, as you were talking, there's a couple of things that I was thinking about, and again, I think that is probably relevant for other folks as well, is finding that balance between that, optional opt-in and mandatory. And it can be successful in some places and not others, but things to think about is that culture. So I'm connected with the system that when they make things mandatory, they're without the conversation, without the culture of learning and that environment around it, it is really, really hard. And so one of the strategies that we've also used is we're trying to move kind of more towards that, like, how are we embedding this where people, it's part of the culture, everyone knows it's coming, it's not something new, is identifying who are our champions and really focusing with those champions to help to build a contagion kind of across our staff teams, because it's a hard to shift that culture, and really how do you build up the excitement with some people. The other thing, we just had a group, I mentioned our Community Advisory Council, and we met yesterday as we were thinking about this next year and how do we want to support programs. And incentives came up, and one of the programs said, and again, it depends on your organization and how much flexibility and funds, but she's playing with the idea of how do we, for their organization, they do their, percentage of just your annual 3% or whatever. but incentivizing with their plans that if they achieve those, that there's an additional percent or up to the 5 or whatever it is. So again, trying to be creative with that. I will say for our cohorts, when we've done those learning cohorts, we have worked with funders. So if we have any funders listening, like it's really valuable. There's a stipend. And so the folks who participated in that cohort received $1,000 for participation. However, we wanted to make sure that they got honored for the work they did, even if they couldn't complete. So 4 times during that cohort, we provided a quarter of the check so that if for some reason they weren't able to complete, they still got that portion. And so again, I know that financials can be a barrier as well, but I just really think, how are we making sure that we are honoring people for the additional work and effort that goes into thinking about that growth? So thank you, Matt, for your.
Matt and Danielle, congratulations on your new jobs. How exciting. I just wanted to reflect that Matt is at the Boys and Girls Club, so that's a local of a national organization, and which has invested a significant amount nationally in training and specifically in training members of the Boys and Girls Club staff and how to be leaders, right? It has a leadership ladder in terms of training. And yet here is Matt and Danielle sitting here saying, I've just come into this organization and we have things, but they're disconnected. So if our kind of strongest and most well-financed organizations are struggling with professional development plans, you can imagine what our other, less privileged organizations are up against. So I appreciate you in there doing this work. I also wanted to reflect, Paul, that this framing around recruitment and retention is a fantastic one. It's really fantastic and needs to go to the people development departments inside large organizations. It's like, hey ho, because the what I see in larger organizations is that the people development, which is really um what is it when you go to the up my brain when you have problems with your insurance, you go to the
Insurance adjusters?
no, not the inside of an organization. I got problems with my medical insurance. I go to the
Human resources?
thank you.
HR
Human
or-
resources. I go to the human resources, which are now reframed as people development. They are they are disconnected, not like intentionally they don't care, but their world is very different than training and development when it comes to the job that people are doing inside organizations. So I think that's where the connection needs to be made in terms of garnering resources for training and development.
I agree. I think it's one of the biggest problems that's plagued the field of youth work since the inception of it is the turnover rate is so high and all that skill and development that gets created walks away from it. And we're kind of in an always reactive mode. And somehow we have to get in front of that. And I think the idea of developing a training plan or being intentional about it or coaching people like Matt is doing is really critical to move it forward. And we're just talking about the field. Think about what that means to the young people. We know many of these young people come into our programs because they have some sort of stressor in their life and they build a relationship with somebody and that person moves on. It's just more trauma. It's more difficulty for that young person. So the consequences of turnover are really grave. And I don't think it gets talked about hardly enough about the importance of keeping people and getting the right people in the field. I jokingly talk about so often youth serving programs are in a crisis mode and they're reactionary and because they have to be, because that's the world we're living in. but they're so happy to just get somebody in the door sometimes. And then that's just such a bad strategy. So somehow you have to have more intentionality about who it is you're going to hire, because it hurts you in the long run to take somebody in just to fill a role. And I understand the pressures to do that if you're in a leadership role. Trust me, I know. But it doesn't serve you well in the long run. Are there other people I love the opportunity to hear from other people, and peer-to-peer learning is such a critical thing. Are there other people here who have plans that would care to share and tell what's working and maybe what they need to improve on or difficulties they're having? It's really helpful to hear from other people. And I don't think there's anybody who's an expert in this field. We all are an expert at our own thing we're doing.
I'll go.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Hello. My name is Rochelle. I am the Data and Resource Development Lead, newly. I've been at this nonprofit for almost 4 years, and so I'm just starting to get into the development side overall. And we're small but mighty. There's officially 6 staff, but we are an intergenerational reading program. Actually, all of our volunteers are older individuals that are over 50. And so I know we are talking about this training program for staff, and they're volunteers near and dear to my heart, but in some ways, not some actually. Everything that you have just gone over, the worksheets, the processes, and possible ways to go about training applies to our volunteers. We have close to 300 volunteers. And our reading program is after school most of the time, and it's one-on-one. We predominantly work with 1st through 5th graders. We actually partner with Boys and Girls Clubs around Orange County, as well as like Title I schools. And so SEL, that was first and foremost. I was so glad you brought that up. Because I mean, we're a reading program, but there's fluency, there's the 5 competencies that go into that. But when we do present this to our volunteers, we have actually a few pre-training services, meetings that last 7 hours. And keep in mind, this is like all in one day. Most of them are in person. Some of them are online, but engagement, I know we're trying. I mean, the last few years, we've done returning tutor retreats to kind of tailor that to them. And I guess my question is, how would we keep our volunteers slash staff? I'm like, they do this for free, y'all. Like that to me, they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts to like give back to the community. Which is another thing, Paul, you had brought up was not the intentionality. I know I am so passionate about my work, and so the retention crisis I think has been an ongoing thing, and passion is so important to that. That was a lot. Sorry. I like didn't want to I wasn't sure how to explain how this applies to me. Perhaps I am a little bit selfish because I want to learn and take everything that y'all are saying and collaborating on and apply it to my job, to my organization.
Well, Rochelle, I would love to make sure to connect with you later, because I've heard from both Minneapolis and St. Paul, our librarians, they have tutor programs and have come to us and said, how do we support our
Yeah.
volunteers? And there used to be a larger support network around tutoring locally that doesn't exist anymore. And so what you're talking about, we're experiencing the same thing and are hoping to help them, think through some strategies, because volunteers, I mean, I think it's great that they're coming in to do some of that time or online or whatever, because it is hard. They're already giving their time,
Yeah.
so asking additional is difficult. And with the I talked about, we use the YPQA or the SELPQA, but that's really meant for group structure. So there
Yeah.
actually is an academic PQA and academic skills building one that was created in partnership with the Tutoring Partnership in St. Paul years ago to say what are those best practices in tutoring relationships. But what I will say that they're experiencing a lot of, because we do know, like, the trauma and just all of these things that young people are dealing with. When you have a tutoring session, sometimes the tutoring part has to take a minute, take a break, right?
Yes.
And so how do we help support any generation, but definitely for folks maybe who, like, some of the terminology or things that they're in coming in contact with are not something they're familiar with, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't have an answer for you. All it
Yeah.
is to say is that is thinking about,
Please.
how do you make it accessible, and that you have that opportunity as well for those long-term volunteers. How do you get them to be those leaders and mentors for the other
Yes.
volunteers as well, or finding space for, I don't know if they're open hours, but to be able to reflect and what are the challenges that they're facing. Let's have a conversation about it. Think about strategies, or just help them unpack it to build their confidence, because what you don't want is for them to have a negative experience they don't feel supported in addressing, and then say, maybe this isn't for me.
Yes. And it's always a two-way street of this reward. And I think this applies to everyone. This applies to me as staff, is that am I being is what I'm doing creating an impact? I think in these kind of conversations that need to be integrated. I know with 6 of our staff, there's over 300 volunteers. We kind of have to juggle, and then these volunteers work with first through fifth graders that are evidently behind in their reading, and so that also kind of adds another layer. And so I know I am grateful that I am not the only one working through these things. And so, yeah.
Yeah, if I could chime in a little bit too,
Yes.
I understand the dilemma, and it's a common dilemma. And if you think about the scenario that you're portraying, and people who are volunteering, you really have no leverage over them other than the fact that they are doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And the reason that people volunteer is because they want to contribute to something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of a human instinct. And so that's what you have to work with. The fact that you have some knowledge that they're doing this because they feel they want to contribute in a way, give something back, be that person they wish they had, whatever that might be. They're doing it because it's their heart that's driving them to do that. So knowing that, then you have to think about, if that's what you got to work with, that's what you have to focus on.
Yeah.
And so the way that I think you can to help with the retention rate is to work from that framework and know the things that they need to have to be good at it: knowledge, skills, and confidence. And if they have knowledge, skills, and confidence, then they're going to feel competent in their work. And that the time that they're giving to you, they're going to have a stronger sense that what they're doing is worth it.
Yeah.
And so you need to set the stage for them to be successful, as Jocelyn was saying. Provide them the opportunities to be really good at what they do. And so when they see a young person improve their reading skills, or they talk to them about a particular emotional, difficult thing, which I know it always spills into, right? It's not just like, we're just
Yeah.
going to read. It's like you get to know each other a little bit and you have conversation. And the more you can help them feel good about that,
Yeah.
then that's really the only thing you have to work with. And so find opportunities for them to, as Jocelyn was saying, to connect with each other, connect with the staff like Matt was talking about, or provide them with training opportunities for the sake of only so that they get more personal satisfaction out of what
Yeah.
they do and frame it that way.
Yeah.
Say, we want you to succeed. Not only do we value your work, we just want you to feel really successful
Yeah.
because we do better when you do better.
Yeah.
And by presenting it that way, I think, and allowing them the opportunity to get really good and have an impact, that's what will keep coming back. I think that's true for us, right, Rochelle? I think that's probably why
Yes,
you do
I
this
was
work
just
too,
gonna say
right?
that.
None of us are getting rich.
Yeah.
We're doing this because it feeds something deeper than our need for financial.
Yeah.
It is something that is deep in our being of who we are, and that's the same for your volunteers, and but on a different level because they're getting zero. So you got to help them be successful and
Yeah.
feel like what they're doing is having an impact, and then they'll want to keep doing it because human nature to keep doing what you're good at, right?
Yeah.
It feels good.
Yeah.
You get a shot of dopamine, you feel
Ex-
good. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think you'd actually said, um, meeting them in the middle. And so also tying back to our training plan, we do have a training plan for volunteers. We have this pre-service training, ongoing coffee chats virtually every Wednesday. So take what you will, y'all. And within that, there's like guest speakers and just checking in as well and building that community within our volunteers, making sure that they can connect, and they can uplift each other. And then we have started, I think last year, one-on-one mentorships, and so not even having like a staff, one of us, check in with a volunteer. We pair someone that's been with our program for at least 3 years with someone that's new, and I think what someone had touched on that as well. But yeah, we the training plan. I know we have some, but they are documents. It's a checklist of things. But is it the most efficient?
Well, make sure, I would encourage you to make sure somebody owns the responsibility for that and
Yeah,
make that real clear.
yeah,
That somebody's in charge of that, because if nobody owns it, then it's going to just get left by the wayside.
yes. Or we like to say like a hot potato.
Yes,
The
right.
time comes around and it's like hot potato, and it's chasing the soccer ball, but everyone is chasing it. So who's left doing other positions? So yeah.
Good point.
Jocelyn, I would just I just want to uplift something that you said for Rochelle, which is um in addition to having mentoring, that's great. You're three people who've been in the position 3 years, paired with somebody else. Another thing is to uplift the people who have been there a long time as actually leaders so that they're doing some of the training. And in your, I'm not sure, it sounds like you do a variety things in your coffee chat, but if you could do a structured story sharing so that people get to share their stories, either of places where they're having some dilemma or places where they're having great success. But that needs to be structured. You know what I mean? It can't just be like, hey, what's going good? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that, having it structured and that intentionality. And when I was
Mm-hmm.
doing the research for that first paper, one of the things what I was asking is, how often do you meet with your supervisor? I mean, it was like we did a survey and people are like, oh yeah, we do reflection. And but then when I dug deeper, it was like passing in the hall. Like, in passing, it wasn't like a deliberate time. So sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't. And so I think sometimes when our programs are really, really good, we think, oh yeah, our staff are connecting and they're doing it, which is great. And then somebody leaves and someone else, and it shifts. And so
The
how do we make sure
succession
that
of
it's,
responsibility.
yeah, how do we make sure that it really is embedded and is an intentional practice that people are working on? Yeah, I was busy taking notes. Thank you all for that. That
Ah,
was helpful as I think about supporting my partner. And I'm going to stick my my email in the chat as well, because I love being a thought partner. Because again, as you know, Paul
Yeah.
mentioned, like it helps to spur conversations and thoughts for both of us. And so anybody who's interested in talking about any of these things, I would love to set up a time, and we'll send that email. I will say the city of St. Paul had a cyber attack in the last 2 weeks. So
Oh, no.
we're going to be resetting all our computers on Monday. So you might not get back until
That's
Wednesday.
fine.
But
I just finished my training on that. So I understand.
You should
Yeah,
have talked to
we've
the
been-
city officials in St. Paul and said, look, here's what
Yeah.
you have to do.
Yeah.
yeah, yes, exactly. That would be helpful. Yeah. No, they're busy.
That's a
Really
big
doing
deal
great
when a
job.
city gets hit like that,
Yeah.
Jocelyn. Oh, I've been watching that, following that.
Perfect. Thank you.
I wonder if I could pick up on a question that I had about, providing training opportunities or professional development opportunities in multiple formats. And I wondered, Jocelyn, how are the quick guide videos? How is the uptake of the quick guide videos? Just curious.
No, that's a great question. And I don't have a real good answer for someone who likes to, now that I do like data and like to get that, for a couple of reasons. Is we have not done a ton of promotion for them, partly because, we were trying to build up the library. And part of my goal was to have some of our colleagues make them as well, but they're so busy. It is mostly me. And we recently got rebranded, so we're going to re-record them. But anecdotally, well, so the support, one of them's called Supporting Staff PD with Quick Guide Video. So it really is just here's some ideas on how you could use this. And it's had 119 views, I don't know, in the last year. So the most, some over 200, some are 18, so we just recently got a new website. Our old one again wasn't, so we weren't doing we were not sending people to our old website. It was literally our launched website in 2012. So it was a long one. So more of that will be going out, but I do hear folks also talking about having used it. So anecdotally, I have some, but I hope more will. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's publicized. Yeah, the reason I ask is because, we've tried looking at all different kinds of formats in the name of accessibility, right? So when when I was doing in-depth coaching of programs, I would say, okay, when can we come train your staff? And I would get this answer: between 5:45 and 6 p.m. That's when everybody's being picked up, and I was like, oh, when this first happened, I was like, oh, like literally you got 15 minutes, So looking at, given the time constraints, what are the multiple ways we can provide information to people that's going to be useful? And one of the things we found is that when we put things online, people didn't want to use them, which, is so frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Paul might have a better, because most of theirs are accessible through online. So you might have some more specific, but I will say there's not one strategy. And I think that's why we're looking at doing multiple strategies.
Yeah.
And like they, for the most part, have been sitting there. And some people are self-motivated and maybe they would do it on their own. But I do think it goes back to, what is that job embedded? Like, how are staff creating a culture and saying, here's some information, let's talk about it and let's engage in it. And that's going to happen there. So yeah, we will continue to have in-person training. We're going to continue to try and support like that longer term cohort type learning community. The one-off network building with, again, the sharing and learning that helps to create that energy, and having some of these that are accessible that folks can pull from. And our statewide Ignite After School has also recently developed, they call it PDX. And it's like a little train the trainer. So, and I don't mean little, but they have some content. So if you run a 21st century site or multiple sites, you could come get their training, have that content, and go back and train your own staff. So depending on if you have the infrastructure to be able to provide it, you just need some additional support. in those areas that's available. But some of our organizations, are similar. They have 2 or 3 staff, and there isn't a whole lot of that large group that they can get within internally. So yeah, multiple strategies for sure, at least for us as a network, and organizations can figure that out. But Paul, you all have a lot of online offerings.
We do, and I think you're talking about individual differences in learning preferences, and the idea that not everybody learns the same way, or not everybody enjoys to learn the same way. So we do have 8 different ways you can acquire information, and I think that's really important. And we see a big diversity of the types of trainings that people are deciding to consume. We can run reports and know every month how much of the different types of trainings and each training is getting downloaded. So yeah, I think that's really important. I think you bring up a really good point, is people do want to learn in different ways. If you'd like, I could show them to you, what we've got, if that's okay, Ren.
Sure, that would be
If we
great.
got a little time, I'll just
We
quickly
do.
share my screen. And I don't know, like, it says I can only share particular screens. I don't think I can share my desktop, and I would need to do that in order to, maybe I can do it this way. Let me try this and see if that works. So here is our training website, and we've got these different learning opportunities. So here's what we have. We have one more coming, but we have recorded webinar courses, which is your traditional courses. Usually they're 1 hour in length. It's kind of sit and get, but there's interactive. We make them highly interactive. We have live webinar courses where you can chat with the trainer and kind of interact. And most of our recorded webinars start as live webinars. But we also have 2 certificate courses. We have a certificate course on youth work, and we have a youth work leadership certificate course as well. And then here's where we gotten, I think, really creative, and what people are really consuming a lot of, and it's what you're talking about, Jocelyn. We have these supplemental micro courses. These are generally take about 15 minutes of curriculum time. They're interactive platforms. They're SCORM packages, meaning that you interact. It's not just reading. And they're all based on one objective, and they're based on skill development. So it's not just like, what do you know? It's how do you go out and do that? And those are really being well received, and a lot of great feedback. And then we have the Youth Worker Toolkit tools. So we've created actual things like, how do you talk about racism, or how do you define your role with a youth worker, and what does it mean that we're working together? So often you start working with people, you don't even talk to them. Why are we together? So we have all these tools for toolkits, and those are just something you take and you use directly with a young person. We have quick take blogs, which are meant to check your learning. So they're a way to stay abreast of your professional development. And each particular, when you're in the our LMS, you then there's a call to higher order. So you get a thing about let's just say building relationships, and that's the topic of the blog. And then if you need to know more, it's always a link to a deeper dive into going deeper on that topic. And then we have these blended interactive courses, which are a combination of webinars and a combination of interactive learning dynamic tools. And then we have interview style courses, which we kind of have branded out as our own. They're a cross between a podcast and a webinar, where we interview people who have like written books or experts on something. And we have an interview, which is a very entertaining way, engaging way to get information above and beyond just listening to somebody talk. So a dynamic conversation is another good way of doing it. So yeah, and we also started not too long ago doing community learning circles, where we do what we're kind of doing today, where we invite people on. We create a topic and it's our member-driven topics, and then we open up a Zoom room, and everybody has the ability to share what they know. So YIPA is the host, but we're not trainers, and we give everybody the platform. So we take our large community and allow people to be the experts themselves, to talk about what they want or ask questions of other people. And we hardly say anything in those. We let our members drive where the conversation goes. We usually give like a kickoff comment, like the last one we did. I just, and everyone's got a different feel, but I just start off with the proposition that relationships are the most important thing in youth work. Let's discuss it. And then we did, and then it just kind of led into a whole bunch of different things. So peer-to-peer learning and having that opportunity, you can really do some dynamic things with online learning, but it's different. You can't just take what you do in person and say, we're going to do it online. It doesn't work. You have to have an online mentality to make them work. So yes, I think you hit upon something very, very important, that people have different learning preferences and learning styles, and you have to meet people where they're at and give them the opportunity to do what they want to do to get their information to improve their knowledge, skills, and confidence.
Thank you, Paul. One last thing. When I work with data and with staff teams looking at data, and actually prior to going in, when I'm working with supervisors around the data that they're getting, one of the things that that I think helps frame how we're using information to improve what we do is to liken it to sports. And I'm here in San Francisco, and we have the great Warriors basketball team. And we also have the great Steph Curry on the Warriors basketball
Hey,
team.
watch out for Ant. He's coming. Okay.
And what I say to folks is, let's look at how Steph got to be Steph in one way. So, how many coaches does Steph Curry have working with him?
A lot.
A
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Nutritional coaches, I mean, every kind of coach available to him. And when he
Absolutely.
goes out on the court, there are people taping him. They are taping that game. And if he has a bad shooting night, he leaves the court, he goes to his coaches, he watches that tape, he gets information from the coaches and through watching himself. And does he take it personally that he had a bad night? No. What he does is he goes back to work and rejigger some aspect of something so that he can perform at the highest level. So it's about saying, what are we doing here? Do we want to be the best at what we do? And if we do, it means that we have to look at what has happened, not as a way of saying we're bad, but as a way of saying, oh, look at that. Listen to what the youth are saying about what's important to them, about how to build safe environments, about how to have relationships, and then start to implement some of those things, right? So I think it's important, particularly with data, because I don't know, we're all kind of like, it's all laden with all of the images we have of self-evaluation instead of the practices that we're implementing and bettering those practices.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work around changing the culture on just that, right? And so I mentioned that we help support folks to understand the tool that we use, how they can do their self-observations within their program, and then we provide external observations. And we've definitely have heard folks are like, oh my gosh, the first time people came that they were nervous, and there was some really is that concern that you're talking about. And now we have youth workers asking for that. Like they're excited for you to come in because they realize that information is not, we don't post, I mean, it is a snapshot. It is just, a couple hours of one day. And so we, give them back the report and it's their conversation to have. Does this reflect what is typical? Is it not? What else do we know about the program? What do we know about our own goals, right? So even with that whole tool, what are their key things that are most important to them right now? And if they're doing those well, what else do they want to look at? And how do we build that in? And so we've done a lot of work. And even in our network, we have some folks who've been using it for a long time. It is a part of the culture of their programs. And other folks still that are new because of turnover, or maybe their orgs are newer to our network, that we're having them hear from their colleagues, right? It doesn't matter. I don't run programs anymore. They don't want to hear from me about how, oh, it's, it's low stakes, don't worry about it. But how do they hear from other people that are doing the work and how they use it and find it valuable for them in their program and those conversations? Like I said, that I can give you an observation and you could say, what does she know? She does not know our program. That's great. Now you talk about what you do know about your program and what's important to you and use that information. And so, yeah, I do think that how do we make sure that people understand when we talk about data, it's only one piece of it, and that what they bring to the conversation is really important. And how do we include everybody in on those conversations, especially the people doing the work?
Jocelyn. All right. Is there anybody else out there who would like to open up their mic and share something, a comment or a question?
I would like to share something if it's okay.
Of course,
Mary.
Mary.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I can't get the camera on right now, but I keep having new team members kind of join the team that have different backgrounds and different personalities. And it seems like, especially, and I hate to say this in case there's a lot of millennials here too, but a lot of the millennial kids are, needing different things, and they interact with their peers differently than they interact with the teens that they're working with. So I'd like to know how you can help us think about ways to build up that teamwork with their different backgrounds as well, to keep them happy, so that they can also, give their best to the students that they serve. It's often what about me first instead of what about the teens first, and that's a little bit difficult for me to understand. So I need to understand a little bit more, maybe their mindset in that context. But I know that it's very important as to provide the professional development that they feel secure, but they also feel happy to be able to be the best they can with the teams that we serve. So any insights or suggestions on how to build that team. Yeah, I just got a new team member again today, and we just had a meeting this morning before this all started, and the one that had already been here, I've been here 2 years, and the interactions between the team members is always tricky, I find, when you're also trying to, give as much as you can with the teens that you're working with.
Yeah, I can start with this one because I go back to, like I said, good youth work practice is good human practice. And so one of the things that we have embedded in all of our staff meetings, any of our gatherings, any meetings that we even bring other people is we always do some kind of community building. Sometimes it's easy as an icebreaker, but we really do also think about what are those things that help to form our identity. And so we've done workshops on that. We've done some of those network gatherings, but really exploring identity and helping folks think about, and I've done a lot of this for myself, like what has made me who I am and the way that I make decisions or how I interact in spaces. And then how do I have a conversation where I hear about how other people think of themselves, and so that we're learning from each other and really thinking about, like, I have assets and things that I bring to a team. And there's some things that maybe I have some gaps in. And when I recognize that for me and find out from the other people, what are their strengths, what are their perspectives and just their outlook on, it might not be that works for me, but now I understand and appreciate them as a team member in a different way. I am definitely a doer. I'm not a big picture visionary. And so, like, I know that, well, Paul, you're a doer and a visionary, but like, I need to team up with someone who can help with that vision, and like, I can make it happen. Right. And so, I think about those kind of things. I think about, I'm a white woman that grew up in the suburb with a college degree, and how does that influence how I schedule my day or how I prioritize things? And I just got done, her last day was yesterday, with a high school student who, that navigates the world very differently. So we all summer have had conversations where I took that as a way of curiosity, like I'm curious about, and we would talk about those things. And I learned a lot from her. And some of the projects that I had slated out for her were better because she took them in a different direction. And so, So the succinct answer is just finding ways to continue to have that conversation where people recognize their strengths and the strengths of others and talk about that. And what does it mean to work together as a team? What does each individual need? So what I might not need, if I know my team member needs that, I can pay attention to that more deliberately. So those are some of the things I think about. But it is thinking, how do we continue to learn about each other more deeply than just what our role is in our job?
Mary, can I ask you a couple follow-up questions
Sure.
so I understand a little bit better? Are the millennials that you are hiring, are they staying or are they short-term generally?
Some have stayed, others, I'm trying to get people with their masters, but they tend to be getting here as a jump start to then go get their masters and then to move on. So we have had a couple people that have been here a couple years, a couple have, been here a year, and then they, so I've just got a new person as well. So um, since the pandemic, we had people before the pandemic that were here for 10 years, 15 years. And since the pandemic, it has not had as long of a stay, but I feel that it's trying to hire people that are young enough to be close to the teens that they can really interact with, but at the same time, a lot of them, as I mentioned, have left, they start their master's program. No, I'm going to stay, but then the master's program gets, another day off this night. I need another day this night. And so it's tend to have, moved on, which is great, for them personally, but.
And you say sometimes getting them to interact with staff can be tricky. How is the dynamics different between the millennials and your other teammates? Can you kind of, I know you'd have to generalize, but can you kind of describe that a
Well,
little
right
bit?
now they're besides me, they're all millennials, and
Oh,
they don't necessarily they have very different views of how things work, and they all have kind of their own idea, even though they tend to have similar backgrounds. They tend to have a very different view of what needs to happen. And so Jocelyn, I really like your idea. Every staff meeting, we always do an icebreaker, how to, share something that we don't know about you. We do things over the weekend. We talk about identity and things, but I think it becomes a little bit more of personality interactions. So just trying to help them, grow of respecting each other. I think what you said is just maybe more understanding of that we all are very different on how we see the world, of how we interact with people. And I've been watching them kind of talk to each other about their own space, and so it's been a little bit challenging for me to think about. That's why I wanted to work with this panel, and maybe I can talk with you guys later. It's just as a staff development myself through education, but more for elementary. We're now working at the teen level, and it's a different ballgame. They're coming with all different types of problems. Many of our Latino kids are, we're dealing with ICE issues here in Southern California. We're developing, working now on the weekends to give food to families that are afraid to go out. There's a lot of things happening, and not every team member wants to participate in the same way. They have different ways to interact. So there's a lot of different things that I think are going on, and just trying to, it seems like it works out very good in the beginning of the school year. But then as you start getting busy and you start, issues come with the teens, everyone can barely has time to chat with each other because you have tons of kids here. Everyone's trying to interact, and then the meetings that we have weekly, it's still it's in the moment when things are trying to occur. It's having that time to really set aside and figure out ways to spend more time to meet. I think maybe it's tricky.
yeah, I know we're almost out of time. Maybe I can just really quickly chime in if that's okay, Ren.
Of course.
I think the millennials are teaching us a lot about what the future of the workplace is going to be like. And it is different. And this is a generation that grew up with a lot of recognition, a lot of coaching, a lot of affirmations. And for me and maybe some other people on this call, we're not used to that kind of work environment, but it is what is being needed now. And the research and the documentation about all this, about how to create a culture in which millennials feel good, is really about frequent affirmations. And also, when you have an intergenerational kind of environment, is to have learning about each other both ways. So I think it would serve you well, Mary, and you maybe already do this. Ask a lot of questions of them. Have them teach you things you don't know. And I think you'll get a lot of buy-in that way. And I think you'll get a lot more kind of team first approach if they are allowed to teach you stuff, because that is what they're accustomed to. They're accustomed to their needs first. And so you got to kind of play with what it is. I think they're maybe teaching us all a lesson. You know, I grew up in the end of the baby boomers. I was just lucky. I grew up with the mentality, you got a job, shut up, you're lucky. You know, they are far from that. They've watched generations, my generation and generations after me, work their butts off, only to be at the end of life and then sometimes get mistreated by employers and things like that. And they're just not willing to do that. So that would be my advice, is to learn from them, and I think you'll get better buy-in.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, friends. It is noon. I just would like to share a couple of things before we leave today. I'd like you all to know that there is a paper coming out soon from How Kids Learn called Creating a Staff Development Briefing Paper. So you will hear many of the same things, I'm sure, echoed in this briefing paper. We are also having on August 14th, in a few short days, a webinar on working with neurodiverse youth in the after school. And we have two presenters coming to talk to us about working with neurodivergency. And lastly, if you would like to see other webinar topics, we have a YouTube channel where all of the webinars are listed. And it's the How Kids Learn. It's the video tab for your viewing pleasure. And I just want to thank you very much, Paul and Jocelyn, for spending some time with us and sharing some incredible resources. I appreciate the conversation. And we will send you out, all of you who have joined this call, we will send you out Paul and Jocelyn's resources along with a copy of the webinar for your own usage. Any final comments, Paul, Jocelyn?
Just on
Thanks
behalf
so much.
of,
I love being a part of the conversation. Sorry, Paul.
yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for the work you do. We're just privileged to work in this environment, and we're around super great people.
Thanks all. It's Friday. Hey, it's Friday.
Got it like that. Yes.
Yay. Take care all. Thanks very much.
I know.